Hello, my name is Jocelyn Smith, and I'm an elementary educator in 5th grade Science and Social Studies at a school in rural southern Ohio. When I teach science, we use a constructed curriculum that uses hands-on learning in order to communicate core concepts to students. Weekly, this looks like teaching a certain content area or standard and then building upon this concept with something like a lab or a simulation. When we start off science, we've used chemical reactions to talk about the scientific method, how we can use an actual experiment to build upon what that child knows about science. In physical science, we do weights, measures, we get to go on runs, we get to calculate speed, and these are ways that students can gain interest into the field of science and physics as they practice everyday 5th grade physical science. We often end the year with knowing force and motion, sound and light, and using things like prisms, mirrors, and flashlights that students really enjoy and get interested into the process of the way the earth turns, moves, and how we see and perceive things around us. These are ways that students can connect everyday science to their lives and hopefully be lifelong learners and take these things into their careers. As a new school year started and many teachers learned about the challenges of remote learning, my new wondering began with how do I create a curriculum that engages students in science learning and also uses research-based practices to use labs and simulations online. This became my research question for my master's research this year. The title of my research is Science Simulations in Screens. The following will be a research proposal on how we can use science simulations to engage student interest and also raise students' understanding and scores in science content knowledge. Thank you for watching.
This report is titled Hands-on Science, School or Screens. It's an evaluation of science simulation labs for upper elementary. The purpose of this study is to evaluate science performance and student interest with online labs. As a little bit of information about me, I'm a middle childhood education major, and I currently teach Science and Social Studies in 5th grade, and I'm working on a master's degree in curriculum and instruction. This presentation outline will hit 4 key points. I'll look at initial inspiration in my research question, a literature review, research methodology, and finally, my timeline and conclusion for this project. My wondering started with how can labs and demonstrations solidify student knowledge of science? Can labs create greater student interest than general classroom learning in science as a field and also for future student careers? Then I wondered if labs could then be extended to an online format, especially for remote learning. And does remote learning open up the door for learning outside the classroom and even collaborating with people across the globe? As I narrowed down this question, my research question for this project became do online science labs and projects improve science mastery and support science interests in upper elementary school? The application applies directly to my 5th grade science standards, which you'll see on the next slide, as well as NGSS expectations and 21st century skills. As a part of this project, I would like to see that students can self-pace through their learning on online labs and have a broader perspective of communication beyond their classroom. This is great because labs can be repeated and they can use 21st century skills and career skills that work alongside labs and online technology. As you can see, the 5th grade curriculum In quarter one, we work on life science, and there are already several online-based programs to look at the way the ecosystems work. This study will narrow in on physical science, so mass, weight, measurement, and the laws of motion, which apply to engineering concepts. My research goals are to test the student mastery of fifth grade science as well as their interest. As a literature review, I looked at 3 main topics: the learning styles in science, online learning, and finally, success in science simulations in higher education. To be brief, I'm going to go through these slides and summarize and not read word for word what you're going to see on the research conclusions. In a study by Wang in 2006, science as hands-on was something that was identified as very high in most fifth grade and upper elementary classes. Many students are kinesthetic learners and learn science best through a hands-on system. Later in 2008, Dubetz and Barreto saw that hands-on learning led to higher student test scores than simply lecture and note-taking in an elementary classroom. Mullen, in 2019, as a more recent study, looked at STEM research and how STEM careers are furthered by hands-on science when it's performed early in elementary school. An active learning study later in 2018 showed that students truly grasp and have more interest in science when it connects with real-life experiences. For online learning, not just hands-on learning, students showed by a study by Cornell in 2020 that they were performing as well, if not better, in online STEM labs where students could self-pace and rewatch lessons. This was also furthered by a study by Brown. Online learning in science was found to produce higher test scores when in a blended model of video chats, online demonstrations, and labs on a screen. I found it interesting as a researcher that most STEM-specific programs in K through 12 were facilitated by a teacher, but students were still able to differentiate these lessons based on style, pace, and ability. To continue, data showed that students were able to harness 21st century skills learning and a greater interest in the course through a formatted program that was project-based in a science field. Most of these studies have been done at high school or higher levels and have not yet been done in an elementary classroom. Back to the Cornell study, showing that STEM students should be able to collaborate with other peers in their own classroom, and this is a reason that online learning was found to be very helpful in science classrooms. Some of my final checks as far as my literature review were to see if there was studied success in online simulations in upper elementary. Because online learning is very new, and until 2020 and pandemic learning, there weren't many online programs for upper elementary. There are not many studies that are already done on elementary learning. My research focus was narrowed by the conclusions of my literature review. 1, success through teaching in a hands-on learning format is something that's research-based. 2, success in online simulations, labs, and practical career-based instruction has been proven at the high school and college level. And finally, success is found in science-based simulations for upper grade levels. In the future, I want to extend this research to compare an in-person 5th grade science classroom to students of the same grade who are learning the material online. I plan to use similar data collection sources such as student questionnaires, science standards-based tests, and character analysis that measures 21st century skills. Finally, here's my research methodology. My guiding question is, do online science labs and projects improve science mastery and support science interest in upper elementary school? Some further questions are, is this possible to fifth grade level? Will online labs raise student interest in science? And will students gain 21st century skills through these online labs? My study and sample will be in a fifth grade classroom. I have 3 groups of 15 students. One of these groups is online only, and there are 5 IEPs in one of my first in-person groups. Our fifth grade class as a whole includes 65 students. The research participants that narrows it down will be chosen as based on a permission from parents and attendance history. School and class data. We see that this class is fifth grade science. It meets in 50-minute blocks, and students meet 5 days a week. The remote students are asynchronous. The school and some district data is that this is in Southern Ohio. We serve about 740 students in the elementary, but are with all students. It may be important to know that we have gone remote or partially remote this year. Students can choose to either be in person 5 days a week or entirely online. Studies have shown in online learning courses that it's important to look at test scores as well as student satisfaction, and this is shown by several research reports, so I wanted to show my research for my data collection methods. My pieces are the following: surveys and student self-reflections given at the beginning and end of my observations. Teacher observation log, where I will collect check-ins and summative, informative assessments. Summative assessments as well. Pre- and post-test data will be given in Force in Motion for fifth grade science. And finally, I will be keeping a COVID exposure and health log. My data analysis plan is 5 steps. I'll be annotating and evaluating, so I'm looking at test scores and putting this into a computer. I'll be labeling by grouping data together for the quantitative test scores, and I'll be coding for many of the student surveys and interviews in order to piece those together in a method that I can later select and choose the data that I want to show growth, and finally summarize. Here on this page you see what the Google form will look like for students to check in throughout and tell me how they are thinking and feeling about the science class and their online assessments. Finally, my timeline and conclusion for this project works in 3 segments. I'll be collecting data and consent in January, where I'll be choosing my participants. From late January to February, we'll be going through the unit of Force in Motion. I'll be completing the data and data collection, as well as the pre- and post-test and survey. Finally, in February and March, I will be comparing and going through the data analysis process that you saw on the last few pages. And finally, my plan is to conclude and look at summaries of this data around March or April. Here is a research timeline data plan, pretty in-depth as far as the days, but something that you can pause if you would like to look at. In conclusion, thank you very much for watching this report. My goal in this research is to further science understanding at the upper elementary level by using this new instructional method that truly hasn't been used at our rural school before. This research is important for the time and age because of health concerns due to COVID and the push for online education. This is both as a health need and a 21st century skill for students. My goal is to find a new way to develop hands-on learning with computer technology that encourages student interest in science careers and 21st century skills. Thank you very much for watching my project today and for being on board with this journey with me as I look more into online learning for science education. Thank you very much.